Before I knew the word architecture, I knew the weight of the world. Before I even drew a line, I followed one, a path, a trail worn by feet that came before mine. Not designed, but remembered. Architecture is necessary. I didn't learn this in school. It took a profound act of learning from my own experience, and quite honestly, this career didn't fall directly into place immediately. I'm constantly asked by students why I chose architecture, why I chose the path that I'm on, and I never really had a clear answer. It's just something that happened. I didn't grow up with architecture in mind. I didn't even grow up with school in mind because, in all honesty, it was out of reach. So really this idea of what architecture is and what it means didn't happen until I had the experience of becoming myself, of finding myself through architecture, and borrowing the words of Isabella Martinez Abascal, who describes it very well, that architecture is a right, but that it never really is truly art. It's an act that provides care for people. It was then that I realized that architecture really is a very important place to hold bodies to exist in this planet. This is the very first place where I came to know architecture as it is, as a living, breathing body. La casa de mi abuela, my grandma's house in Chihuahua, where I grew up half of my life. I come from Rochiachi, Chihuahua, from the Sierra Madre, from a place where the land is not silent. It breathes, it listens, it holds you accountable. So we don't call it architecture, we call it life. The ground was never just ground, it was sacred. It was a living ancestor beneath every step. So we learned early that we as architects, we don't build on the land, we build with it, or not at all. We walked long distances, not because we had to, but because it was how space reveals itself. Each step stretches time, each path becomes memory, each repetition becomes a map, not drawn, but lived. Before I ever understood plans, I understood sequence. Before I understood sections, I understood elevation through breath. And then I understood life before I ever understood architecture. And when I entered this discipline, everything began to make sense. somehow everything became still. Architecture is necessary. From this point on, when I entered design school, walls appeared, boundaries hardened, space was no longer something you moved through, it was something you contained. I was taught to draw straight lines, but nothing approached you straight. I was taught to design objects, but nothing I knew was ever just an object. And I began to wonder, what happens when architecture forgets? What happens when it forgets the land, the body, when it forgets the memory? What happens when it forgets where it comes from? And so upon reflecting, something that this very place, this very site that we're on right now, that we are in, and Professor Elena Roque, who hopefully will join us later, what she taught me was that architecture does not belong to us. It belongs, it moves through us like stories, like footsteps, like something we were never meant to own. It belongs to the people, to the land, to the histories that refuse to disappear. So my work does not begin with design, it begins with listening. I learned to ask, and I think this is something profound that I've come to realize, that my life's work is not just to be an architect, it is to give back, thus making architecture necessary. OASI is a project that's very personal to me. In 2023, after my grandmother had passed away and my godmother and my aunt, who lived in Mexico, also simultaneously passed away, I took on this project as a way to preserve their memories. This project I've been working on is a restaurant located in Pili, Chihuahua, conceived as a space where eating becomes collective ritual rather than an individual act. It's an homage to the ancestral cooking of my aunt and my abuela, two sisters who lived their lives as an act of care, not only to people, but to the land. Throughout their lives, they tended to these very cornfields and taught us that they are sacred not because they are economic assets, but because they are spiritual fields where land is activated through planting and tending. Ancestors are honored through the cultivation. Community is taught and woven together. Planting is not agricultural routine, it is a spiritual act. Originally a small and intimate dining space, the project expanded into a formal mechanical workshop, maintaining its intimacy while accommodating a larger communal experience. The architecture is organized in a single open space where kitchen and dining are not separated. Preparation and consumption coexist. Diners become participants in the act of making food. A 15-meter communal table anchors the space, dissolving boundaries between guest, cook, and process. It is organized around ritual and brings up the idea that food is not hidden, it is performed. The project is defined by restraint and intention. Exterior remains largely untouched, preserving the memory of the site. Raw steel plates filter light and threshold. Interior uses ash-colored stucco to create a quiet, almost one aesthetic atmosphere. Cooking surfaces clad in black clay and barro negro. All materials are locally sourced and handcrafted. The result is not aesthetic, but material honesty. Cooking is not backstage, it is central. Eating is not private, it is shared. Architecture here becomes a framework for collective experience. The architecture steps back, not as absence, but as care. We had the idea of preserving our ancestral cooking through the corn, which is a sacred plant to us. My grandma and my aunt taught us that the corn gives life to everything around us. It feeds us, it cultivates the land, it connects to the cosmos, it connects to our spirituality. So the project reminds us that architecture is not something we own, it's something we're entrusted with. To build is not to create, it is to accept responsibility, to continue something without breaking it, to intervene without erasing, to hold space for something ancestral. work now is not to create, but to remind that architecture is not something we make, it is something we are already a part of. So, I wanted to keep this presentation very short and sweet, but I want to end with, not a conclusion, but with gratitude to my students who walked beside me, because in teaching, I thought I was passing something forward, but instead, you brought something back to me. A way of seeing, a way of questioning, step by step, line by line, memory by memory, and for that, I am deeply grateful to each one of you. You brought me back to my roots, to my origins, and to why I decided to study architecture. Because it's a way of remembering, it's a way to give back to not only people, but to the land.
Como así dijo al principio, nuestro Dios, que estaba una persona en un pueblo, vivía pues solito y muy triste. Entonces no había ningún instrumento. Entonces